So the next session, which is about to start, really builds on some of the themes that came up in that discussion with Tim, looking forward to what's going to happen to public service broadcasting in the future. It is the era of the global streamers, and that presents great challenges for the PSBs. We've entitled the session, Can They Survive, Never Mind Thrive, in this environment? And we've got, as a panel, most of the PSB is represented by exactly the right kind of people to talk about this. So I'm much looking forward to the discussion. So the panel is made up of Carlin Hyatt, who's Director of Strategy and Consumer Input at Channel 4, Insight at Channel 4. Sean Dole, who's the Chief Executive of S4C. Gareth Barr, who's Controller of Policy and Regulatory Strategy at ITV. And lending her overall view of the future, the Claire Enders, VLV patron, and also, of course, probably the leading consultant commentator on the media market in the UK. I'm delighted that Janine has stayed on to chair this session as well. So, assuming Janine, you've had time to catch your breath and so on, I will hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've never done back-to-back sessions before. If I'm still running through questions to Tim Davey, please excuse me. But we've got an excellent opportunity to reset and focus on SVOD with a presentation from Claire Enders. I think we're going to start with that. Claire, are you with us?
I am.
Excellent. So Claire's going to go first, and then we'll hear from everybody in turn, just to sort of set up the talking points, by which point I will have focused on this new agenda. Claire, please kick off. Thank you.
So the question that was asked, can the PSBs survive and thrive in the era of global streamers? Well, so far, the last decade, Netflix started January 1, 2012. The answer has been yes. So let's just see the first slide, please. So this slide gives you the context of what Colin and we all know to be the era of global streaming. There has been a tsunami of expenditure by titanic American companies over the last decade. If you look at the blue line is what Netflix has cumulatively spent, which is $85 billion on TV content over the last decade. And of course, that material is constantly and concurrently available. So it's basically an enormous impact on our market. In yellow, you'll see that the total UK PSBs have spent actually not that far off what Netflix has spent cumulatively. And more importantly, they spend it every year. They spend it in very, very different ways. But overall, you can see that since 2010, and despite some very difficult conditions, including the pandemic, the overall UK PSBs have grown their expenditure on original material all the way through this period, come what may. And very much to segue with Tim Davies' point about what happens when you have a squeeze on your income, there is one additional lever that you have to pull, which is to finance them differently. And that's really what we've seen a great deal of emerge in the last decade. The UK PSBs have proved themselves to be very innovative in how they finance programs, because actually their income has either fallen, the BBC's, by 30%, or in the case of ITV Channel 4, it has not grown particularly strongly by comparison with online advertising and so on. And in particular, we've had 2 years of good growth coming out of the pandemic, but there was a very, very steep fall during the pandemic. Now, the other way in which the PSBs have been able to survive and thrive, please turn the slide, in the face of unbelievable expenditure in essentially English language material, has been because the view that linear would be completely destroyed by non-linear viewing in a blink of an eyelid turned out to be false. Here on this chart are the minutes of linear viewing engaged in by all these different groups in the population, and you can see that even the 4 to 15-year-olds are still watching quite a lot of linear every day, even though over 50% of their consumption is to 3-minute phenomena, particularly TikTok and YouTube. And that's actually been the case for almost 17 years in the UK. That age group of the under 24s is very focused on non-linear. And I use that term in the broadest sense because there are non-linear options offered through Sky Q, on Virgin Media, and so on. And non-linear is a much more telling term than streaming. But you can see that far from a collapse in linear advertising, we've had a slow decline. And given the amount of expenditure of unbelievable material and genius that has been aimed at this population, you can see that this shows that the PSBs certainly get more bang for buck. And in particular, I would say that the BBC has extracted a lot more for every single penny that has done a lot more with a lot less over the time. But that's also the ingenuity and innovation has been true across the board. If you turn the page, turn the slide, please, you'll see that in terms of overall linear TV viewing across the population, the PSBs are still accounting for a very, very large amount of consumption. Now that's because despite the very high profile crowns and so on and so forth, British consumers will always, generally of any age group, will always overall prefer British made material to American made material. That's been true as long as I've been in this country, which is over 40 years, and I'm sure it will be true forever. But it's also because raw expenditure doesn't equate with charm, with great characters, with great script writing, with great acting, with all the ways in which the British ecology constantly innovates. Turn the page, the slide. You'll see another good reason why the PSBs will continue to thrive, and that is not only because linear viewing has probably another 40 years left in it, simply because that is a consumption pattern that fits with people's real lives, but also because the structure of the population, 31% of the UK is age 55 or over. And as you know, because we're all representing them, this is the core group of VLV members, of which I am one, and also the patron, and nearly 1 in 10 are 75 or older. Within that group, there are about 8 million households that have never subscribed at all. So for those households, actually all of their consumption is PSB. The other reason why the PSBs are thriving in the UK is because, let's face it, the story is just not video alone. There is a lot of radio consumption that continues to be very mature, but also is sustained. So we've had no comprehensive move to nonlinear listening either. The next slide, please. So for those with wonderful long memories, like everyone who is listening, you will recall that in 2009, Luke Johnson, the chair of Channel 4, said there was no future in TV advertising. It was a complete fud. Anyway, so over 10 years later, this chart shows that as a result of suppressed consumption through the pandemic, there has been an incredible bounce across these 2 years, 21 and now 22 as well. We will see that the overall picture will provide for a very robust resting place. Now, looking ahead from 22, from this year, where we expect TV advertising to still rise at around 10%, we're looking at a severe recession in the UK. When that starts is probably in September, and it will become more severe. We know that in 2023 and 2024, the only growth in the market will be online advertising. The situation for TV advertising will be relatively bleak. However, ITV and Channel 4, which are exposed to this, and Channel 5 are confronting this situation in a very strong financial position, certainly compared to where they were during the pandemic and the depths of the thing. Now, moving on to our final slide. So streaming has been funded by the US capital markets. Netflix is still significantly cash flow positive, negative, decades after the inception of its services, and indeed many, many years after it went for the streaming model. This, like many .com stories, the streaming story is something that only benefited the market leader, but the herd of those who followed into it is now being covered with the blood of negative cash flow. You see on the yellow element here that ITV itself, despite an extraordinarily robust change of business model, the acquisition of many production companies, its stock price has been as negatively affected as those of Disney and Comcast by the look and feel of a streaming company, despite the fact that it's actually sustained by advertising. So streaming has become, instead of being the genie's lamp, it has become the curse of these models. And we see that the streaming companies will have a very, very difficult time, not because we're predicting a bond crisis or a banking crisis, simply because the capital markets with rising interest rates, with every consumer in the world feeling the impact of this conflict in the Ukraine for years to come, I'm afraid there's going to be a reduction in the number of subscriptions. We've already seen that impact start. It's going to be significant, and therefore the PSBs will yet again move back into the frame as the core form that they have always been throughout this bonfire of a decade.
Thank you, Claire. Vivid as ever. It's always great to have your numbers to kick everything off. You are the master. I've rarely seen anything so positive from Claire Enders, I suppose, unless you're a streamer. Khalid, can I turn to you to answer the essay question? Can the PSBs survive and thrive? I would think you'd feel a lot more confident after those numbers.
Thank you, Janine, and thank you, Claire, for that very, very clear and very helpful presentation. And indeed, thank you to the VLV for inviting me here to speak today. Look, it's great to be here for a very timely discussion on the future of PSB, and absolutely, we at Channel 4 share Claire's view that despite significant changes in the broadcasting landscape, the role that the PSBs play is as important as ever, if not more so. And that actually, with the right creative and commercial strategies and with a supportive regulatory environment, the PSBs can not only survive, but indeed thrive. Now, my starting point when I think about this is that, UK viewers and we as UK PLC very much benefit from a plurality of business models in, what we have here is a finely balanced PSB ecosystem. So obviously the publicly funded BBC, and we've all just heard from Tim, ITV and Channel 5 as the more pure commercial PSBs, for want of a better term, in that they're commercially owned and commercially funded. And then, of course, Channel 4 with our unique status as a publicly owned but entirely commercially funded PSB, with the distinctive remit that we have to create change through entertainment, to represent, challenge and reinvent, and our publisher broadcaster model that has underpinned the UK's world-leading independent production sector. Now, that plurality of business models drives what Ofcom has called competition for quality in UK PSB, whereby the range of models, each underpinned by different purposes, remits, and sources of funding, drives PSB players to compete and innovate, and ultimately that drives benefit for viewers. And it's benefits for viewers in terms of a better range and volume of high quality public service content. So our view is that, in order for viewers to continue to benefit, it's vital to maintain that plurality and competition for quality going forward, in order to ensure that we all in the PSB sector writ large drive innovation and maintain the diversity and quality of British content for viewers. And I think that's the kind of overall, I guess, in a way, policy and PSB context, which I put as an overlay over Claire's presentation, which is that, Claire's presentation makes clear that there are real market challenges, but we're addressing them, and we're addressing them in the interest of viewers. So just a few points from Channel 4 in relation to kind of the market perspective. Look, no one denies the challenges in the broadcasting market. They are real. Linear viewing decline, particularly amongst younger audiences, which obviously is something that we as Channel 4 with a younger skewing audience absolutely have to focus on, and streaming services increasing competition for viewer attention. And as Claire says, the PSBs are addressing those challenges well, and I'm happy to say that we at Channel 4 are addressing them head on. So I'm sure conference attendees will be aware of Channel 4's Future 4 strategy, which we announced in late 2020, which is focused on driving digital growth and diversifying our revenue base. So we set ourselves ambitious targets to double the size of our streaming business. So to double all 4 views to 2 billion views by 2025, to reach for digital advertising revenues to account for 30% of our total revenue base by that time, and for non-advertising revenues to be 10% of our revenue base by 2025. So we're just over a year in to that strategy. And it's delivering success, right? In 2021, we achieved 1.5 billion streaming views on all 4, which is pretty much halfway to our target, to our 2025 target. Digital advertising is now 19% of our total revenues, so we're well on track. And actually, 2021 was our best year ever in terms of financial performance, both in terms of top line revenues and in terms of the financial surplus that we generated in that year. And indeed, kind of going back to where I started, given that we're a publicly owned, commercially funded PSB, we run ourselves as a not-for-profit entity, so that surplus is reinvested back in delivery of the remit. And what that means for viewers is not only are we able to continue to focus on delivering the content and services that viewers value, but in 2022, our content spend will hit record levels, so the highest content spend ever by Channel 4. In that context, in terms of the way we're prioritizing digital growth, All 4 continues to be the UK's biggest free streaming service in terms of volume of content, with over 14,000 hours of content from It's a Sin to We Are Lady Parts to Gogglebox to Davina McCall, Sex, Myths and the Menopause. So that's distinctive British programs that only Channel 4 would make. And indeed a number of those programs won RTS awards this year, BAFTA Craft Awards earlier in the week, and indeed a number of BAFTA TV nominations for this coming weekend. For next week. So look, as we go forward, as we all know, there are big and important questions being raised about Channel 4's future, and we may well, I'm assuming, come back to some of those questions in the Q&A session that follows. But I think what I want to say here is that our focus will continue to be on optimizing delivery against our remit and making distinctive British content for viewers as we continue to engage with government and Parliament on those important questions, not only about the future of Channel 4, but about the future of PSB in the UK.
Thank you, Khaled. I'm going to turn to Gareth now to give us the view from ITV, but I'll just remind everybody watching to type questions into the box as we go along, so that we can make sure we get to your points in the Q&A. And please do remember to say who you are and where you're from. Gareth, please, if you'd like to give us the view from ITV. Sorry, you were just having a drink. You okay?
All good.
Please
Thank
give us
you,
your
Janine. Yes, it's good timing, isn't it? I've clear the throat. Good morning, everyone. Great to be back. Another VLV conference. And look, it's clear from everything everyone has said today that the global streaming services are a huge part of UK life, and headwinds or not, I think they're here to stay. Ofcom says that 60% of UK households use at least one SVOD service. That's not an inconsequential amount of usage. And Claire rather vividly set out their content spend, which is significant and seems to be ever growing. But then, of course, the PSBs are also a huge part of UK life too. ITV is universally available and free to view in all UK households, not just 60%. And we deliver levels of viewing to match because ITV is on great form creatively at the moment. So 97% of people in a TV-only household watched ITV's main channel last year. 35 million people watched each week, 17 million each day. 25 million people came to ITV Hub last year. And it's not just older viewers, important as they are. ITV is the most watched channel for 16 to 34-year-olds. ITV2 is the most watched digital channel for 16 to 34-year-olds. How are we doing against the streamers? Well, last year, we delivered a 7-day audience in excess of 5 million people, nearly 450 times. I think over the same period, Netflix had one audience over 5 million. So I think the enduring appeal of PSB content, even in an era of streamers, is pretty evident. And perhaps that shouldn't be a surprise, actually, because Ofcom research has found that audiences want both the best of global content from the likes of the streamers, but also the brilliant and uniquely British content that the PSBs excel at. Audiences want both of those things. And that's why we're confident we can continue to survive and thrive in a streaming era. Well, what does that mean for ITV? Well, look, it means focusing on what we're good at. It means high quality, genuinely British content that connects with people, shows the places and cultures right across the UK, and doing that at scale. For ITV, that's bringing the UK together with must-watch, must-see live television. Think Britain's Got Talent or the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations coming up, the World Cup later this year. It's serving millions each week with the UK's two most watched soaps, Coronation Street from Manchester and Emmerdale from Yorkshire. It's new UK-centric dramas like The Thief, His Wife and Canoe on last week, set in Hartlepool. Grace is back on this week from Brighton. D.I. Ray is coming next week from the Midlands. Not as fashionable, perhaps, in media policy circles to talk about those sorts of dramas, but much more viewed by UK audiences. Rather timely, it's our news output, now extended by another half an hour each evening, and pretty crucial at the moment with journalists on the ground in reporting from Ukraine. And that's a notable absence in genre from the streaming services, a notable difference. For us, it's our regional news output as well, often in the top 10 most watched programmes every single day, and the only choice to the BBC's regional TV news services. Or it's documentaries. We've had on a documentary on the Falklands recently. We've got Julie Bradbury talking about her personal experience with breast cancer coming up later this week. That is a content offer of breadth and Britishness that the streamers simply cannot and will not match. And that's why the PSBs can thrive in what's being termed this SVOD era. But as Carla said, it is an era of intense competition for people's time and attention. It's not just enough to make great content. It's critical that we get that content to people whenever, wherever, and however they want. That's why we've announced major investment in our new online service, ITVX, which is going to be a predominantly free ad-supported service with a premium paid tier for those who want it. It'll be one of the largest content service in the UK, around 15,000 hours of on-demand content, plus all of our live streams delivered online, with all of the personalisation that people come to expect. Of course, there are challenges, notably actually for us, less perhaps the streamers, more the rise of global online gatekeeper platforms. We think that perhaps as early as next year, as many as 60 to 80% of new TVs sold will have a big tech operating system working on them. So the PSBs are going to become increasingly reliant on global online platforms for access to UK audiences. You only have to look at what happened with Facebook and its removal of news from the whole of its platform in Australia to think that there might be some problems with that. Even if we are present on those platforms, there's no guarantee it will be on commercial terms that allow us to compete fairly with the global streamers, which is why we and the other PSBs have been calling for reform of the PSB regime to ensure that PSBs are made available to UK viewers on all major online platforms, that we are easy to find, and included on terms that enable us to make a fair return on our significant but still risky investment in genuinely UK content. So that's why at ITV we're confident that with Parliament's support, our brilliant, uniquely British content delivered to audiences whenever, wherever and however they want means we can and will thrive in an era of global streamers and global online gatekeeper platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. And finally, last but by no means least, Sian, CEO of S4C, can you please chip in? Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'm delighted for the opportunity for S4C to provide a context to this incredibly interesting debate at the minute, and the competitive one. Bore da pawb, and thank you, VLV. There's a lot of what Khaled and Gareth and Claire have said that I'm going to say as well from an S4C perspective, because we, the same, are a public service broadcaster, but we have a very, very unique purpose in the fact that our purpose is about supporting the Welsh language and have been so for the last 40 years. We were set up by a Conservative government with a clear mission to ensure and protect the Welsh language, and our role hasn't changed from that. However, the landscape has changed incredibly within that timescale. Our remit is very much around Wales, but we also have a third of our reach outside of Wales with people who demand Welsh content across the UK and as well as internationally. And we were delighted with the latest settlement that we've had from Nadine Dorris, which talked specifically about our purpose in terms of increasing or helping and supporting the view of the Welsh Government to get to 1 million speakers Welsh language by 2050. So our role is incredibly clear and our purpose is really clear. However, we still have to then perform and compete in a very competitive landscape, and just because people speak Welsh, they still deserve that quality of programming that we need to provide for them and make sure that service. And never was that more important than COVID, where we really saw how our channel supported the local community, supported what was going on from the news perspective, and also we set up a service for the government for Welsh education across the children of Wales from 3 to 18. And that role in terms of supporting Welsh households, mixed households where we only have one speaker, but also the myriad of learners that we have hasn't changed. But our challenge is actually, our purpose is to serve our viewers and our audiences from when they were born right up to senior. So our remit in terms of content creation is actually quite a challenge. And our role as well from the economy for the creative sector is incredibly important in Wales. We have our headquarters in West Wales. We co-locate with the BBC in Cardiff, but we also have presence up in North Wales. And our independent sector and our creative sector, we support across all of Wales. And that is incredibly important for the culture and for the creative sector here in our country. But what I want to talk about a little bit is I believe that we can exist absolutely in the world of the streamer, however competitive that is. And we're doing so by being real collaborators. We are actively looking for partners. And I'm delighted with Khaled and Gareth on. We have a partnership with the BBC. We co-locate with them, but we also co-produce with them. Some of you will have seen Keeping Faith, where we did a back-to-back, where the people of Wales saw the same programme in the medium of Welsh as well as what was seen by millions and millions in English in Keeping Faith. We work with ITV. We're just about to bring a documentary out with ITV, which is also going to be co-produced. And we're also, Khaled, we've just won a BAFTA for an award for a programme with Channel 4, which was fantastic for daytime programming, a format originated in Wales, but then co-produced across the UK. And we're just about to come out with a huge drama with Channel 4, which is also back-to-back, where Joanna Scanlon, the BAFTA winning actress, is going to be doing it in Welsh. And then it will be shown in Wales in May, and then shown on Channel 4 in September. And those programming, the Welsh audiences deserve that. They deserve that value programming and that content and that standard, but doing so with partners. And we also see a lot of our content now on the streamers and being sold internationally. And we've just had a format that's just been sold to 5 countries, which was originated in Wales. And we're really proud of that. And a really big purpose for us is to be open to collaboration, because we're not competitive because of the language, but it brings value back into Wales, but also value across internationally as well. But our challenges from a technical perspective is we have to now make sure that our players and that we are agile enough to be able to be available on whatever device our audiences want that, and that we're actively doing that. And I agree with Gareth, it's really important for us in terms of the regime that the prominence that we will get on these smart TVs and so on, that S4C can be found exactly the same as any other PSB here in the UK. So that to us is quite a challenge in the landscape today. And we want to give that financial muscle of the global players will actually be really important to us, and seeing the government supporting that for Esbyrec will mean that we can actually coexist, because it's incredibly fundamental to the audiences. So from from an S4Rec perspective, we have a big challenge, but we're also quite excited, and we think the opportunity for the PSBs, as I've just talked about, is so important, and no more so than in Wales. And we have a real protected status here by our audiences. Our audiences feel very, very protective of S4Rec, as well as the fact that we want to exist and should exist from a film and language perspective for the time to come. And you know, our purpose very much is about helping Welsh Government to get to 1 million speakers by 2050, and our audiences of Wales deserve that value and deserve that quality within their language, and that's our purpose, but in a very competitive environment, as you can imagine. But I thank you for the opportunity and a really important debate.
Thank you, Sian, and thank you everyone for setting out your perspectives so thoroughly. I've already been told off for using jargon, rightly. So if we could now focus on limiting our use of SVOD, PSB, non-linear, and so on, and try and remember we have an audience full of people who like programmes on watching and listening, as well as policy. Claire, can I just start with you? Because obviously the news from, well, primarily Netflix this week was so financially catastrophic, and the blood bonfires. Is there a danger that our public service broadcasters, having sort of made all their policy and strategy over the last 5 years in fear of streamers, now get a little bit too cocky and fail to recognise the future peril?
Not at all. I mean, the trends of pressure from this expenditure are growing. The number of streamers present in the UK has grown, is continuing to grow. So no, I think that really what we're looking at is essentially that the BBC now has a 6-year deal, which is a hugely significant way that it can plan. And I think that especially because what we've seen in the bounce in TV advertising is a very great deal of .com companies advertising and so on. The mix in TV is very strong, and we've seen that ecology really firm up. But I think that you know, will the pressure ease up? I think that we're already. I mean, Netflix has announced to its staff that they need to restrict their expenditure. I think we'll see that across the board. As I said, the increase in the interest rates in the US are going to drive down excess capital availability for the streamers. But that doesn't make a material difference, given that everything in the UK is fixed. The BBC's deal is fixed. ITV knows, and Channel 4 knows, that a recession is going to bring a very difficult environment for them next year, and that the only thing that will grow is probably video on demand. You know, the BVOD section, the non-linear advertising offered by ITV and Channel 4 and Channel 5 are likely to, and Sky are likely to grow, as indeed they have YouTube. I mean, that was the other thing I was just going to point out, that we haven't mentioned YouTube, but YouTube, which is in fact a streaming platform, actually has just under the total UK video viewing of ITV, and twice that of Netflix, and twice that of Channel 4. So actually YouTube, which is not dependent on subscriptions, continues to be a very, very important part of the mix. And to my mind, given the drop off in subscriptions, is going to continue to be one of the top competitors for that young audience that the PSBs must chase.
I wanted to ask the others who obviously are responsible for specific services, how they feel the balance between sort of global, commercially successful or attractive content and regional, distinctive, specific, speaks to audiences, builds loyalty. Where you think that is in the pendulum right now, and how you think it might change over the next 3 years, say, just to pluck a number at random. And can I start with Khaled?
Yeah, look, really good question. So, I mean, I think what we've consistently seen here in the UK is that, viewers consistently demand distinctive British content, right? And I think that is where the comparative advantage of the PSBs comes into play, right? And I think it was actually Ender's colleagues did some very good research recently on the kind of the character, as it were, of content on the SVOD services, the global streaming services relative to the UK broadcasters' content, and the content the UK broadcasters provide is more distinctively British. And I guess I come back to, as you'd expect me to, really, the way we at Channel 4 think about that, right? Is that what we have is, we at Channel 4 will be carrying programming in the same genres that ITV does, that the BBC does, but that Netflix does. But the character of the programs are different on all of those services. So, It's a Sin is a drama, right? Everyone carries drama, but there's something very Channel 4 and distinctive about It's a Sin and the impact it's had in relation to HIV and AIDS awareness. And it's a program that can only really exist in that form on Channel 4. Similarly, we all do comedy.
But streaming responds very well to great big numbers, like huge number series. I mean, I don't mind, kids are constantly watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine on All 4, which does not seem to be a especially unique piece of British programming.
Well, no, but all services, all services from all broadcasters or non-broadcasters, it's about packaging up content in a way that's attractive to the viewers, right? And acquired content, archived content is an important part of that, as well as distinctive new content, whether it's a Sin, We Are Lady Parts, and other things that we might get into. So I guess I come back to where I started, right, which is that the plurality of business models and the plurality of content is of value to viewers. I talked about plurality amongst PSBs, but actually it's about plurality and competition for business models more generally, including the free-to-air broadcasters, the streamers, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, that coexistence of a range of models is in the interest of viewers.
Sean, is having such a distinctive and sort of fundamental purpose as programmes in the Welsh language just a massive advantage, or does it ever sort of, is it too much of a pigeonhole?
No, I think it is an advantage for us because it allows us to collaborate with different partners, like I mentioned earlier, with Channel 4 or ITV, or and as long as we are true to the Welsh uniqueness of our content, for sure, but it still has to be entertaining and to the quality. And by doing partnerships with people like the one that we're doing with Channel 4 literally now, with it next month, the May, where Joanna Scanlon will and Alex Roach, and we've got people from Game, the Welsh language is distinct in that, and it's filmed in Wales, but then it has absolute appeal to go out and to be sold. So it'll be going out in the UK in September, but it'll also be showing in America as well. Our authenticism is the key for us, but then making sure that we then provide that with an entertaining and a quality, and it is an advantage for us because we can work in partnership and in collaboration with a lot of productions and producers to be able to then create 2 or 3 formats, if you like, and then being able to sell those worldwide. So but the truth for us is about keeping our authenticism and our distinctness around providing unique Welsh content, but then making sure that that's continuing to create the awards that we have done from what we've produced.
Gareth, where do you think ITV is on the big global versus keep it real in the heartlands?
Keep it real in the heartlands. It's I think
I don't know where that came from. Sorry.
No, this would be the world's worst rap battle. I think let's not go there. I think. I'm not sure for us, we see it as a versus question, as a competitive question. So if you think about the heart of ITV's schedule, we are live to the nation for 8 hours every single weekday morning. That is inherently British. It's about the issues and people of these islands. There's nothing we can do to change that or make that right for the SVOD market. If you look at some of our big set pieces in the entertainment world, whether Britain's Got Talent, classic end of the pier style entertainment, if you like. Again, it's very much a genuinely British thing. Might it be a format that travels? Potentially, but ITV is full of the voices and people of the UK, and I don't see that changing. And I would worry about us making programs for our linear channels that were somehow deliberately intended to go global. That I think is a recipe for underperforming on your main channel, and very much likely not, as Netflix is discovering, to be a guaranteed hit globally either. But the big other half of our business and a big part of ITV strategy, which I've talked less about today, is ITV Studios. And we are making content for a wide range of others, that whether that's the BBC, whether that's Channel 4 in the UK, or whether it is increasingly with those global streamers. So for us, if there is extensive production of global content, we are well set to use the brilliant talent in the UK. The UK is a production hub at the moment. There's this surge of demand. We're well set to take advantage of that. I don't think that means we need to compromise on brilliant British content that our viewers want to watch. And so I think those things can live side by side for us.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you all quite quickly to assess, because we are tight on time, to assess the chances of a sort of collaborative PSB SVOD, by which I mean the linear channels all come together and produce their own streaming service, in the light of what's happened with BritBox. Gareth, I'll just ask you quickly first.
Yeah, look, there's no simple answer to the challenges.
Try, we're tight on time.
Right, I know you have heard from us today. We are focused on delivering ITVX. We're really excited about it. We think there's real demand for an integrated, free, ad-supported video on demand service with an SVOD tier, bringing together ITV's great content and those from third parties. I'm not going to talk about a joint PSB player.
Claire, could there or should there be a joint PSB player?
No, we've been there, done that.
Doesn't work. Okay. Well,
it's also in France. France Télévisions is removing itself from Salto and leaving that to the equivalent of ITV TF1 to take forward. I think Gareth's point that there is a real distinction between advertising supporting models and other models is a very good distinction for certainly for PSBs to make, certainly when they're reliant on the license fee.
And let's face it, despite Sean's collaborative nature, they all fight like rats and sacks anyway. They can't agree on anything. I have a question from Carol Tong, who she asked the same question in the previous session, so we'll do it now. What role do you believe PSB channels have to support UK independent filmmakers to make feature film that tells uniquely British stories that no global streamers will make? Just very quickly, because it's 2 minutes, but I can see Khalid nodding. Khalid, the days of film 4 are behind us, aren't they?
No, the days of film 4 are film 4 is going great, and indeed,
I gave you that.
I know, and indeed, well, film 4 is, as you'd expect, a core part of my answer here, right? Yeah. So I mean, so look, I think there is an important role. There is a very important role for in UK funding of British film. We do it. The BBC does it. The BFI does it. And that's really important, right? In relation to Film 4, Film 4, spends 25 million pounds a year in British film, and actually spends more on British film than the BBC spends broadly in line with the BFI. And actually over the last 5 years, around 100 million or so that Film 4 has invested in British film has helped unlock around 450 million of total investment in UK film and filmmakers, because we do work in partnership with other funders of film. It's a standard model, right? And that is.
Does everybody else have a duty to do it, or is that Film 4? Is that 4's responsibility?
Well, I mean, look.
Yes or no? We've got 30 seconds.
I'd welcome views from others on that. I think a contribution from across the sector would be valuable.
Excellent. I'm going to stop role playing for today. Yes,
can I just say that we've just set up with Welsh Government a creative film fund for Wales, with a real view on talent and how we can foster that talent in Wales, as well as giving opportunity for our producers and so on. So I think it's incredibly important and something that we've all got a role to play with.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I've never felt more like a radio host. We are out of time. We must let Gillian Reynolds and James Nofty take over the stream. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope that everyone got to say what they needed to say, and thank you for taking part. Thanks.
Thank you.